Hey everybody, this is DJ.
And Chris.
Welcome to the Lot 1 podcast. On today's episode, we talk with Spade Robinson about the Atlanta Film Project, story consulting, and the industry as a whole, and so much more. Let's get into the podcast. All right, so we are here with Spade Robinson, who is a filmmaker and story consultant. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So for the people at home who don't know who you are yet, do you mind giving us a little backstory?
Absolutely. So I actually started out as a theater nerd. I was a theater nerd in high school and college. After college was over, I was auditioning and all of that in Atlanta, and I wasn't really moving forward. And my mother suggested I go back to school for something, and that's when I decided to go to film school. So that was sort of the beginning of everything. After film school, I spent a large part of my career in artist support, nonprofit artist support world. So working with organizations, working at Sundance is where I spent most of my career. And that's where I started to learn how to use what I know about storytelling to help filmmakers and screenwriters get to where they're going with their story. And I've sort of been doing that ever since alongside making my own.
Awesome. How did you get started working at Sundance?
Actually, someone in my graduating class at USC was already working there. And he was on his way out to go to a different position. It was just as simple as him being like, I know somebody who can do this. She's the female version of me. You're going to love her. You should hire her. And of course, I did have the interview and all of that. But if you follow me on TikTok or hear me preach in any given scenario, you'll hear me talk about the wealth of relationships and maintaining those for the purpose of being able to weather this and open doors for yourself and everyone else.
So before we kind of get started on that, what is a story consultant and sort of what is that? What do you do?
I like to think of it as helping whoever the storyteller is, writer, director, whoever, get to the most compelling version of the story that they want to tell. So whatever their vision is, I sort of walk alongside that with them and help push them in the direction of whatever the most compelling version of that thing is. So it can be one-on-one, sort of how I'm talking to you right now, consulting on somebody on their individual screenplay. It could be a course, or it could be, I also teach on the university level, so it could be something like a large classroom. And then half of my work is working with organizations, so nonprofit artist organizations that support artists, Sundance, Film Independent. I consult with those organizations, helping them to choose the artists that they're going to bring in to be a part of a cohort or a fellowship or a lab. And then also on the for-profit side. So a studio or a network may have open call for bringing in writers or directors and stuff like that. And so helping them decide, who their cohort should look like helps me to know what studios and networks are looking for. And then I'm able to bring that back to my clients and help push them in the direction that they want their careers to go in.
What are some of the criteria that you've seen, or like some of the things that you look for when you're choosing the fellows?
So, it depends on the mandate of each organization. Film Independent is an organization that really centers the independent voice, the unique point of view, and that sort of singular vision from a writer or writer-director. And they are positioning you in a place where you're far along enough to be able to benefit from like a high level of programming and perhaps placements in the industry. Whereas something like the Nicholl Fellowship, who I also consult with, they're all about voice, and it's not necessarily about being far along in your skill set. It's about how unique and interesting this voice is, and their fellowship is a year long, so you have a lot more time to cultivate that artist. And then on the network side, if I'm working with a network, they are looking for writers who are ready to staff. That's the point of a network fellowship. And so you're much further along then, and a lot of times may already have representation and be able to jump into whatever opportunity may be available on the for-profit side.
So there's a few different tiers, right? There's the ones that are for brand new folks who are just getting started, or maybe they're not just getting started, but they've got a bit of a voice that they've sort of cultivated. And then you've got people who are a little bit further along who just needs like a little bit of help. And then you have the people who are like ready to work right now.
Well,
type
I
of thing,
think of
or
it more along the lines of what need is a program solving. So you as the artist have to then self-curate what you're applying to based off of you being self-aware enough to understand where you are in your career and what kind of support you need. So something like a mentorship tends to be better served to people who have some experience and sort of need help navigating the field. Whereas some labs are so hands on because you're actually writing while you're there. It's not about a polished script that you're taking out. You need mentorship with. It's about, I see a nugget of what this writer's trying to do. And, our program is built to help fine tune that. So I think a lot of times we get frustrated when we don't get into the kind of programming that can push our careers forward. But I think understanding what kind of support you need is really important because on my end, I may see a talented writer who is so ready for the next step, but I know what my program can accomplish. And it's not built to help that writer, even though I like their work. So it's not all about merit, and understanding that I think helps alleviate some of the disappointment that can come along with applying to these programs.
so one of the things I was thinking about is, you know, you listed like three just now. Are there a lot of different like fellowships and labs and incubators, and or are there a certain amount, like a certain set amount that like exist?
I would say there are a lot more now. I mean, I remember a time
Okay.
where it was like four organizations,
Yeah.
and I feel like there's a lot more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that more artists are breaking in. It's a weird thing where the way that the money works in the industry, the ability to be able to catch all that talent that's coming through programs kind of has to be the end of the pipeline has to be working in order to benefit everyone coming through those programs, even though I think there are a lot more programs than there used to be.
So do you think that there's more programs because of the state of the industry, or do you think it just naturally happened? Because you mentioned like it depends on the end of the pipeline, but if the pipeline's not really producing a lot right now, how does that affect what you're doing?
I
Sorry.
No, I mean, this semester, I definitely had a come to Jesus moment this semester. Like, it's probably in the middle of the semester, I had to pause and ask myself how I felt about the ethics of being a film educator and not being able to foresee a lot of opportunity for my students who wanted to be filmmakers. And it's not that it's not there, but I didn't want to lie either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I feel like that level of transparency isn't something that I got as a student. What I do encourage filmmakers is to understand the entrepreneurial nature of their work and to think of themselves as studios and networks with a slate of projects and really figure out how you're going to use the relationships in your life. So that's what I'm encouraging. But to your point, it's something to think about. It's something you want to be transparent about. I think, yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm always transparent with my clients about where I think things are.
Mm.
I've been thinking about this a lot because I went to film school and then I graduated right 2019 and then pandemic hit 2020. And basically from the pandemic on, it's just been like a crazy ride for the film industry, as we all know. But recently I've been thinking a lot of like, on TikTok, I see like a lot of like producer mentors or like independent producers who create content or like trying to create communities and stuff, which is great. But then I see comments from like students being like, what should I do? And I feel like, why would a school be like, hey, like this job may not, the opportunities aren't as good anymore because then they're just not going to get people to come to the school anymore. I've been thinking a lot of like, also the ethics of like film school right now because we don't know what kind of industry is going to exist in 1 year. We just don't. And so like if what you're teaching them now isn't what the industry needs anymore, then they just wasted like 4 years of their life. Well, not fully wasted, but it changed. What I learned in film school isn't what the industry is anymore. The processes are changing so drastically. So
The business model is changing. I'll tell you what the trajectory of like the emotional roller coaster I took my students through this past semester, which is starting out because I teach two film business courses, but I also teach a storytelling class. And so the baseline is storytelling. People who can tell story very well. That's a skill that doesn't become extinct. And in fact, it is something that is not, I don't think, taught enough. Whenever I'm on TikTok or YouTube or wherever, there's so much content about how to shoot a cool shot okay, our film industry is built on like commerce, art, and technology, right? So, because of those three pillars, as things change, you have to know how to manage the other ones, right? So, the thing that's moving in our industry right now is changing a lot with technology and where stories are coming from. And, are we going to continue to hire writers or a different type, all kind of different artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then you have to look at the art and you have to look at the commerce and say, how do I hold on to my understanding of the buying and selling of stories as technology is becoming unstable, right? Or the other two when another one is becoming unstable, right? Like, how do I hold on to the integrity of the art if the commerce is changing its model, right? Like, which part is sacred that I need to be focusing on right now? Okay, so thinking of those three pillars, I think that if you teach students or clients or whoever you're talking to at a base level, what is the core of this pillar and what's the core of this pillar and what's the core of that pillar, then you are teaching them a lot to be a lot more prepared to navigate whatever comes their way. Because technology in film changing is not new. Like, ask the people who were shooting on film and they were ancillary business to that. Ask the people who have this special lens that's now a part of every single camera. The technology is always going to change, but storytelling, a compelling story, that's never going to change. It's never not going to compel human beings. And then what's considered art and what's considered valuable in terms of commerce, that's going to be up and down as well. But in film school, if we are only learning about one specific thing, one specific part of the process, which is usually the art, then we're not preparing people to navigate the other part. And those things are foundational. So I guess I'm saying all that to say that I only think film education is ethical if it's teaching you the business as a whole and helping you understand how these pillars work, not what it is now, but how they function, so that when you get out there, you're not dependent on the way things worked when you went in.
So you want to
that
teach
makes sense.
more of the foundational, the core elements of each of these pillars, because those core elements, the engine that drives them, doesn't necessarily change over time. It's the engine, right? It's the pieces around it change. So that's what you're saying, right? I think.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of that.
No, yeah. I mean, the thing that sticks out to me the most that you kept going back to is the story, right? Like, ultimately, and I've said this so many times in so many conversations, like, as long as you can tell a good story, it should always go back to the story, right? Like, the big blockbusters are failing because the stories are bad. People don't like the stories. Like, ultimately, people can get past bad CGI or, subpar acting if the story is there because it moves them and drives them. So it's like, for me, I completely agree with what you're saying of, like, if we can teach storytelling will never change. A good story, compelling story, that will never change. Where it come from might change a little bit, and hopefully it doesn't change too much because we're human beings. We still need to tell stories and experiences. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I, like, when I reflect back on my film education, they always talked about story, but I never learned any business. I never learned, like, I was taught how to make the thing and how to write the thing, but how does that relate to literally making money and surviving? I'm not even saying become rich, you know what I mean? Like, I just need to survive, and that was never taught.
I did kind of want to go back a little bit to some of your sort of the work at Sundance. I guess, how did it inform your passion to become a story consultant?
Gosh, it was such an invaluable experience. I mean, I learned almost everything I know about developing story there. And it's only because the simple thing of, like, sitting around in a conference room with very smart people dissecting, like, why we're going to fund this or why we're going to support this and why not. That it's like iron sharpening iron, because you start to build up language, you start to build up confidence about being able to explain why something isn't compelling. You start to be able to see a pinpoint the moment something starts to fall apart. And I think that's kind of where I built that muscle. It also helped that their mandate, Sundance's mission, is all about the independent artist. So taking a step back from and turning off the part of my brain that would be thinking about how I would be telling a story, or the decisions I would make, that training of figuring out what it is that you want to say and then helping you get where you're trying to go. I think that was a skill set that I picked up there as well. And in particular, working in documentary. So I'm the biggest doc nerd in the world. I love documentaries, and learning how to develop a nonfiction story. It's literally like lifting weights for your storytelling mind, because you have no control over what happens in real life, but you are still required to craft a story, design a story, orchestrate a story the same way you would with like a screenplay and the 3-act structure or whatever. But you don't have control over these elements. So you kind of have to wrestle them down to create something compelling. And by the time you learn how to do that with elements that you have no control over, writing a screenplay is like slicing through butter, because you have all of the control to tell a compelling story. There's no reason to ever write a bad screenplay. I mean, people do. But I think that being my experience at Sundance helped prepare me for being able to support storytellers both on the fiction and the nonfiction side.
What are some of the intangible things you sort of need to have in order to make a good screenplay?
I could talk about this all day, so please jump in.
Spark notes. You got this.
Question is like music to my ears. Okay, so I'll talk about the things, so I don't take up all the time in the world. I'll talk about the things that people tend to miss that are extremely important.
That's a good one.
World building, like having tight world building. The rules of your world are tight. And I think a lot of people think when it comes to world building, you have to be writing something in the sci-fi space where there are monsters or aliens or something supernatural in order to have rules to your world. But every world has rules. If you have a script that's taking place in small town America, I need to know, how does gossip work? How does information flow in this town? What's likely to happen? What is socially acceptable? What is absolutely not socially acceptable? How do people communicate? Like what's considered taboo? Like I need rules to this world. And the tighter it is, the more succinct it is, the richer your screenplay tends to feel. I would say invest in developing relationships. So the dynamic between a character will be different in this relationship versus this other relationship. And that coming way through language. So there's this page in Script for Scratch where I ask everyone to create their character dialect. And it's because characters communicate in different ways based on who they are. So the more I develop how this character communicates and how this character communicates, putting them in a room together then creates an explosive dynamic. Because how it's interesting to watch characters miss each other in conversation sometimes? Well, if I spend time developing the cadence and the rhythm and the way that one character communicates, and let's say they never say anything straight out, and I develop the other character who only says exactly what they mean and how they feel, and I put them in a room together, now I'm watching them move around each other in a way that's not just dialogue, So that I would say is another thing, like figuring out how your characters communicate. And maybe the last thing would be point of view. So whenever I can get a sense of a writer's and you can world view by reading their screenplay, it can be about whatever. I think the more I trust that writer, the more I trust what I'm likely to get from that writer. And that just is a very hireable thing if you're the kind of writer who is looking to be hired.
Most of us don't like money, so we don't even want to be in that. That's awesome. you said this, you mentioned this a couple times already, and I'm jumping around a little bit here, but you mentioned relationships a couple times, and I liked I liked your philosophy around relationships in the form of nepotism.
Mm.
So do you mind kind of explaining that a little bit, like your sort of ideas about nepotism, and uh, or
Yeah.
you can re-clarify what nepotism maybe means to you
Okay.
in that way. Yeah.
So to me, nepotism means, well, when I see it, it happens when there's someone in a position of power or hiring or something like that. And whoever they choose to hire or whatever, they may bring in because of there being a prior relationship or an understanding of, who that person is, or relationship with someone that they're connected to. So it's just like a warmer lead, I guess, than just strictly off of merit. I read your screenplay or I saw your resume and I decided to hire you strictly off of merit. There's like a substance there, between how that person got the opportunity, perhaps. I think nepotism is a neutral thing to me, right? It is like gravity. It's just a thing. And now the connotation, particularly in our industry, or in entertainment industry and maybe even sports, but the connotation is that it's negative and somehow should detract from somebody's merit. Like, so if I had a relationship with an executive because that executive went to college with my mother and I got hired as an assistant because of that, then the connotation is that I somehow lack the merit, or that both things can't be true at once. Where I think nepotism is powerful and positive is when it is an equalizer in a way that people don't expect, right? So for example, because of the systems, right, that we may say are terrible, the isms, racism, sexism, homophobic, like all the isms, right? Because of those, there are opportunities that I may not get access to as a woman person or as a Black person or as a whatever person, disabled person, whatever. But a warmer relationship, nepotism, could help me circumvent some of these isms that are part of the system that we want to dismantle. That is a way of dismantling that. So I think because it's a neutral thing, in my opinion, anything can be abused. And I think we tend to think of that. And we tend to also think of the small amount of opportunities and feel as though if they're being filled up with all of this nepotism or nepo babies or whatever, then there's less opportunities from the rest of us that don't come from the situation. But I think the small amount of opportunities is more of the big bad guy than the concept of nepotism, as opposed to being like, well, there shouldn't be so many roles going towards these types of people. It should be based on people's talent. Then I think we need more roles. We need more opportunities from people across the board. There shouldn't be less than 2% of people who try to make it in this business actually make it. The economics of that is the thing that is nuts. The capitalism of the situation that we're in is the thing that's nuts, not that people who have relationships get opportunities.
Yeah, it's interesting. I as you were saying that, I was thinking about like the bigger studios, and when just for instance, like Disney or something, they make a Marvel movie, and that movie is $300 million, or you can do any of the big blockbuster movies that we're seeing right now. These like really large budgets. I feel like if this is just a random thought, right? But like if they were to like take chances on smaller films, like if they were to break that up into, instead of making one movie for $200 million, they can make 100 movies for $2 million, right? And which may not be the thing that they would want to do. It's a lot of work. In a way, you're hedging your bets by like having so many different projects that people are working on, and one of them could blow. So. But I think I'm wondering if you see like the current studio system, having an effect on the amount of opportunities that are there. I mean, with the contraction and things of that nature, you know.
This is gonna sound weird, but when I was in film school, my teacher picked up his phone and he was like, "You see this? You see this? This is where people are gonna be watching movies, you know, when you graduate." And this is like, you see, because I think Netflix had just come out and smartphones were becoming more popular. And I remember him like holding up his phone and being like, "This is the future. You need to figure out how to make things for this screen and all of this." Everybody's saying digital. Um, and the truth is, he was right, but also wrong. And I think everybody thinks they know. Even if you track the trend and how the technology is trending, you also have to look at how people are changing and people are trending and what they're craving. Things seem to go in one direction, right? And so we're following that, and there's a doomsday down there for independent filmmakers or studios or whoever. Okay, what am I saying? I'm saying this because the true answer is I don't know. And I'm weary of the this is exactly how this is going to go down, because I think we have an idea, like we can see the cracks, we have an idea, but I've seen us be so sure about so many things, about what people are going to want. That's what I mean when I talk about the business of like what's happening. Everybody bets that they know exactly what people are going to want, and I'm not so sure about that.
I like that.
I do too. I mean, it is true. I mean, we look at the last 4 years, like I'll use TikTok as an example. What people are gravitating towards and what creators are blowing up, it's like you're told this is the format. If you do this, you'll blow up. And then like literally 2 months later, it completely changes. The whole trend changes. And it like to see from like quick consumable, like brain rot stuff to like now it's like we just want to see real people talk about real things. It doesn't need to be over edited. It just needs to be natural. It's like that jump from over edited to people are just wanting real life feeling. And that's why like YouTube creators are blowing up so much right now. Like, you know, creators in general, because they don't care. They're just there being themselves, telling a story. Like, of course, there's a level of fakeness to it because we're always fake in front of a screen a tiny bit. But like, they want genuine like feeling. It's under edited. It's not super fancy. It's not crazy. So just to see that switch from that, I think you're totally right with the industry. We think it's going to go one direction, but it may land completely different. Because ultimately, who's consuming the content? People. And if people don't want AI generated content, 100% AI generated content, then there's going to be a premium for human created content.
I will tell you one prediction. Somebody, I don't know who was giving me advice a long time ago. I think maybe I was watching an interview with Shonda Rhimes, and I think this was like post 2016, and she was saying I could have never made Scandal now because we were in such a interesting place, very calm place when Scandal came out. And so we were so intrigued by like the drama and the conspiracy and the just the soapy corruption of it all, right? I think with us becoming more desensitized to certain things, people are going to crave the feeling of something being like genuine and sweet and good natured. It's kind of like when you ate something really, really sweet and you kind of need to like wash that feeling down. I think people are going to start to feel that need for that kind of palate cleanse. And this is like no judgment, but I think the crassness and I think people are going to get fatigued. So for anyone who is interested,
and dramas coming back. That's what we're saying.
I see the rise of the good guy possibly coming back. The flawed villains, just, the hero villain person. I think we're like, yes, this is real. Yes, this is authentic. Yes, I identify with it. Oh my God, they're running the world. I'm exhausted. And so we'll see.
Today's episode is brought to you by Saturation.io. Saturation is a modern, cloud-based budgeting and expense management platform built specifically for filmmakers, producers, and production teams. Designed by industry professionals, it helps streamline financial workflows for films, TV shows, commercials, and so much more. With real-time collaboration features, customizable budget templates, and automated expense tracking, Saturation eliminates the need for clunky spreadsheets and outdated software. It supports seamless imports from tools like Movie Magic and offers powerful insights and controls without that learning curve. So, whether you're managing a small indie film or a multi-million-dollar production, Saturation gives you clarity, accuracy, and control all in one place. With a free tier available and proven for use by producers across all budgets, there has never been a better time to experience the next generation of production finance. Click the link in the description to get started today. All right, let's get back to the show. I'm going to go back a little bit to the Atlanta Film Project.
Yes. So the Atlanta Film Project is a consulting firm that supports screenwriters and filmmakers through a bunch of different products. So one of them is a screenwriting workbook called Script from Scratch. So that is sort of the programming that I do, like in my courses, that's basically a version of you doing it sort of at your own pace. And then I also provide courses and fellowships or one-on-one consulting with me. So that's half of my business. And then the other half is working with studios and networks and production companies to help them either support or hire the talent they need for their projects.
What's the goal with that?
Man, well, the big goal is to democratize the process of having access to do this as a career. There's so many wonderful, talented storytellers where if the government were to ask them what they do and where they would classify storytelling and filmmaking, it would have to be a hobby. Like it's not a career for the vast majority of people who want to make it a career. So I'd like the Atlanta Film Project to stand in a place to equip storytellers to be telling stories at the highest level, because it starts there, and to equip them with resources to be able to do that, the education and the resources and the relationships, right? Like the community where people can tell their best work and support each other. I don't know, be comrades in this whole crazy thing that we decided to do.
Awesome. Cool.
Great.
No, I love it.
How can someone get involved with that?
So the easiest way is probably to go to atlantafilmproject.com. On my website, you'll be able to see everything that I offer, the courses, or find a way to get on my calendar where I can work with you and read your script and consult with you. You'll be able to see upcoming classes or get Script from Scratch. It's available on Amazon. It's available on TikTok Shop. It's available on my website. So that's the easiest way. But if you feel like you're not ready to engage with me directly, going to my TikTok and just watching videos, I try to be as transparent as possible. And that way, if you have questions, you can ask there.
Awesome. You know, I was actually going through your TikTok and I was struck by an idea about filmmaking, the journey of it, at least, and how it sort of parallels with, the classical storytelling, like hero's journey, and how I guess we oftentimes think, the hero, is going through life thinking that they want something, and then when they get it, they realize that that's not what they wanted, or that's not what they needed, And so, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the hero's journey for a lot of filmmakers, when they get the accolades, the big things that they're chasing, and how it's a little bit more of a marathon than a sprint?
Yes. Being a filmmaker is a marathon and not a sprint, primarily because most every filmmaker is a freelancer. Even at the height of your game, you're a freelancer. You're going from project to project to project to project. And because of that, you have so little control over the concentration of success in your career, right? So let's say if you right out the gate make this feature that's highly acclaimed, which is rare, but it does happen, and there's a steady trajectory up, you never know like when that's going to change based off of those pillars we talked about, right? And these last couple of years, I've seen a lot of us experience the need to pivot to survive. And it just became like super, super clear to me that too many of us make filmmaking our lives. And I don't think that's a sustainable way to survive being a filmmaker. The best work that I read has to do with it coming from writers who are people who have like experienced life. That's what makes it so profound, right? But I also think it protects you from wrapping your self-worth up in your version of success. Okay, so the reason why I say that is because as we age and mature and grow as people, what we can imagine changes because we've seen more, right? So you can only imagine and fantasize about what you can see. As you see more in life, you're able to have a bigger scope of what it is that you. If you do not expand that over time, you will be crushed by the things that you have no control over changing. So the economics of the film industry, the technology that's primarily used for the film industry, and what is considered a high level of art. Those things you don't have control over as they shift and change. And so because of that, where you fit in the industry can change without your consent. My hope is that all of you are super successful and get everything that you want. But if it is the primary thing that you want, I think it may make sense to spend some time thinking about more universal things and investing in those as well to have a full life. I know it's not the sexiest advice, but I think it's just the truth.
So working not just on your career as a filmmaker, but working on your relationships with, your partner, or with, your family, or your health, things of that nature.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 1000%.
I can definitely get behind that. Yeah. Yeah. I think, for a lot of people, especially in this industry, at least from my perspective, I find that, because it is such a like hard, like it feels so pie in the sky. You feel like you need to like work and kill yourself in order to get there, because like I oftentimes, even now, I oftentimes say that, like, if I don't do it, nobody will, like I need to like push through everything. And I feel like in this industry, it really, there's honestly not really a track that you can get. Like if you're a law student, you do this step, this step, this step, you become a lawyer. I don't know really exactly how that works, but whatever the steps are to become a lawyer, you do them, and then you become a lawyer at the end of it,
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
it's about getting clients, whatever. But like for filmmakers, it's not really linear. I mean, there may be like studio tracks that you can take, but even then, like things could shift and change, and then you have to like figure out something else, and like pivot to something else. And so I think possibly part of this reason is there's like a lot of mystique around film, and so like when you get into it, you don't really know what it's about. Like you don't know all the details about it, and so you have to like learn the details. And maybe this is gatekeeping, don't know, but you have to learn the details as you are like um, as you're doing it. Like you have to learn like a little bit as you're going. So maybe
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that going on. So
It's unfortunate. My dad calls it the rules and the real rules, right? You learn what the rules are, and then you get in a little bit deeper, like, oh, these are the real rules. It is a little bit like that. And that to me is bothersome because I think when people understand how things work early in their career, they can have much more sound strategies and feel a lot less desperate,
yeah,
and better able to navigate their careers. So I feel very much if I know it, you know it. And I think if we make that contagious, it won't be as difficult to navigate.
yeah.
What piece of advice would you have for someone who feels lost in their filmmaking journey at the moment, or feels desperate, like I got to get there now, or like I'm running out of time? Like what piece of advice would you give them?
Um,
Because you kind of touched on it a little bit here where you're like experience life, but like, you know,
would tell them if they feel like that, and I get it, and I have felt like that many times.
Mhm.
Um, I would tell them to grieve immediately. Start grieving the life and career you thought you wanted. Grieve it now. Doesn't mean you won't get it. That's not the point. Grieving, you need to let go of the fantasy of it. Usually, and I'm going to talk a little bit like I talk to my clients, unfortunately, because it ends up becoming therapy at some point. Usually there is a younger you, or a group of people, or a one person, or an idea where you want to prove, I am great, I am worth it, I am whatever. See, look at all what I've done, what I've created. And you have to look that in the mirror. The sooner you do that, I think the better off you are, because the more you can let yourself feel safe and not guilty for enjoying life and experiencing life, the more honest your work becomes, because you're not trying to cater to what you think is going to help you move forward, and your relationships become a lot more genuine and a lot less transactional in the industry. And I think when that happens, the doors that people open for you, or the conversations people are willing to have for you, and how honest they're willing to be with you, and where they're bringing you along or wherever, ends up becoming so deep that it's less jumping from thing to thing to thing and feeling that desperate thing, which is why I don't think that being anti-nepotism is the way we should be thinking about things. Because I know that there are people, if let's say if I were to get a show made, if I were to, I know there are people I would call immediately. People I know who we have been broke together and like shared McDonald's, or I can't pay my rent, I'm calling somebody, and she can't pay her rent, I'm figuring it out. So you only get that, I think, when you're willing to be vulnerable enough to have real relationships and invest in them, which is time consuming and takes you away from other things, right? Yeah, I think you get your ride or dies that way. Um, and I think that you have to come to grips with the fact that you're not in control over when it happens. You're not even in control over how long it lasts when it does
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
You're not in control of any of it. So you have to learn how to love your life.
Mm.
That's the only advice I would give.
Yeah, I before this conversation, I had like an idea of like your philosophy and your on networking, but I love the overall message of like loving your life. I mean, it's I feel like there's just so, especially because it's such a relationship business, like people are feeling the need. You know, this I feel like there's like so many more networking, you know, like mixers and things you go to. And when I go there, I'm it's just difficult to meet people because they're like, oh, cool, got your name, let's on to the next. Like it feels so like transactional, and like I like the times where I like, talk to somebody, I'm talking to that one person for like an hour because like we're just talking about, you know, like different ideas and things like that. And I feel like that to me feels like a better thing. It always feels, and I feel like I'm guilty of this too, of like being like, oh, cool, like what do you want to do? Great, like I could think of how I can use that later, you know. So I guess a question that I would have for you is how do you go about networking in an industry where relationships are basically all that matter, you know, at the end of the day, right?
Right.
Um, in a way that is doesn't feel so transactional.
I would say two things. One, the first thing, what is more less relationship driven, and that's just doing your research and understanding how the industry works, where the money flows from, how people get hired, and how people get paid. When you understand that breakdown, the types of relationships you seek out are going to be different. You'll understand, like, oh, it kind of looks like that is who hires the kind of job that I want, but really, this person hires that person.
Hmm.
And when you realize that, you network more efficiently, and you don't have to do as much of a volume of like meeting a bunch of people, because then it feels like I met 100 people and I can't really maintain all of these relationships, and I don't really know how
Yes.
they're all going to work out, and
Yeah.
I can't really dive deep with 100 people. But when I understand, okay, I'm in a place in my career where the thing that I really need is this over here, then I can be more pointed toward that. And then I have more capacity to have deeper relationships with people who I meet who can't do anything for me, but it's going to be like a fellow soldier next to me. And surprise, surprise, a lot of times people can open doors where it doesn't really look like that would be the dynamic. But because the relationship is so tight, when they come across something that could be for you, you're the first person they think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Well, we are getting towards the end of this. There's more questions, but I obviously can't
There
get to
always
them.
is, Stagey.
There always is, yeah. Before I let Chris give you the last question, this is just maybe more selfish, but you mentioned how the money flows. Is there a way that you could do like a quick
Yes.
thing, or
Okay.
no? Okay.
So, and this is not anything that like the only reason I know and understand a little bit is because I used to live with a studio executive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't have that relationship, I would probably I would know more now. I mean, I've been doing this forever, but things, they just want crystal clear for a very long time, even though I have been in it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm saying that to say that unfortunately, if you don't know this, it's not on you. It's because nobody tells people. Okay, so this is just the studio system. This is not independent and all that. But usually you track the money from where the IP is coming from, right? So if I'm a studio and I own a library of IP and I'm ready to pull one out and make one, then I will have an executive who is over this, and this executive will say, okay, we're taking pitches on this IP, and then send that around to agents and managers who will then send back a list of their clients who are appropriate to pitch for that project. And then the studio say, okay, I'll take these meetings, right? That's super simplified way of how it goes. But when I learned that, I was like, oh, so I need to get on one of those lists. Well, how do you get on one of those lists? Your representative sends out a list of their clients that would be appropriate. So then traditionally, that's the relationship that you really want to cultivate and make sure that you and your rep are on the same team and you're being sold the way that is best going to put you up for jobs, right? And that you're the kind of client who then can close jobs. So, but if the IP comes from, let's say, I have a first look. I'm a production company. I have a first look deal with the studio, and we're bringing our own IP in to pitch. When we have a first look deal, which means I have to go to my studio first, then it's not coming from them, it's coming from us. But they have the ability, the first right to refuse it. And so they will hear the pitch and either finance it, or then you now have permission to take it around town elsewhere. So if that is the case, then whoever ends up catching it usually ends up greenlighting it, paying for it. If you're coming from more independent space without that infrastructure or overhead, then you could be a producer who the IP is coming from you purposely going out and seeking out writers. You find a script that you love, through your relationships or whatever. And you then may license it to take it out and try and finance it, or you may work with the filmmaker or the writer or whatever, or maybe you're that writer. So then you're independently financing it. And that is about cultivating your own relationships with either high net worth individuals or investment companies or whoever invest in film. So depending on where you're positioned and where you have access to, that'll help you understand what kinds of relationships you should be looking for and investing in.
That's great. That's good. All right, Chris,
I have permission now. I have okay. Cool.
You have you've had it the whole time.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but that was more specific. So I just want like a broader answer for this one. If you had one piece of advice for filmmakers today, what would that one piece of advice be?
Okay. I'm going to preface this by saying this would be my advice. So it's coming from a slightly jaded filmmaker, but my advice is always invest in loving film. You'll go through seasons where it feels like an abusive relationship. And you have to find a way to love it again, because your work represents how you feel about the art form, and your decisions become real desperate when you're grasping after something because you feel like it owes you. So you have to refresh that love affair, I think, if you're going to make healthy decisions in your career. And that would be my advice.
Wow.
It's great.
That is really good advice.
Well, thank you so much, Spade, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Great. I could have sat here and talked to you about this for hours.
And maybe we will another time. But before you go, where can people find you? And can you tell us a little bit about the book, maybe?
Yes, so you can find me or get in contact with me at my website, atlantafilmproject.com. I'm at Atlanta Film Project on all the social media, on TikTok, on Pinterest, actually, where I post like screenwriting tips, like in lists and stuff like that. And on TikTok as well. So all of those places, I read messages if you have any questions. Script from Scratch, my screenwriting workbook, is available on Amazon and TikTok Shop and on my website. So for those of you who have an idea and kind of need a structure to go through the development process, Script from Scratch is perfect for that.
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show today. And,
thanks for having me.
We'll see you hopefully soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
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 That's a wrap for today's Lot 1 podcast episode. Thank you so much to our guest, Spade Robinson. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Huge thanks to our producer, Mina Vazarian. You are a gentleman and a scholar. And shout out to today's sponsor, Saturation.io, who makes budgeting a lot easier. Make sure to check us out on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot 1 Podcast. That is the LOT number 1 podcast. And also check us out on lot1productions.com to see all the fun stuff we got going on. And today's film lingo of the week is
last looks. It is a phrase used by the first AD to let the crew know to check the actors one last time before we start filming, or even equipment. So that'd be like, are they sweaty? Is their costume on backwards? Did continuity wise, did their hairs flip from the right to the left? It is last looks, last chance.
Also called looks or calling the lookers. These are also terms that are used for this.
Film is weird. And there's a lot of terms.
Yeah, a lot of terms. And every other week, you get to learn another one if you didn't already know it. All right. Thanks for coming in, and we'll see you when we see you.
Bye. That was rough in the best way.
Yeah.
Do something funny.
You're looking at it.